Hi, Namaskar. I'm Jyoti Kiran. Welcome to a special program, History Hunter, a program that takes you through a journey of time. And our special guest today is Delhi's well-known vintage memorabilia collector, Aditya Vij. Aditya ji, how this hobby turned into a passion and how it all started, please tell.
The story started actually very young. I used to go out on walks with my father and I would end up picking up matchboxes on the way because they used to be a very interesting thing for me. That interest still carries on, and today I almost have a 3000 plus matchbox collection which goes to 1920s onwards. From there, history has always been a point of interest, and I eventually went on to studying anthropology, which actually inculcated a lot of factors as well into me. But I actually started and decided that I should put these things together because over the last 20 odd years, I saw things changing far too quickly. Every technological aspect changing, everything going into a different direction. And that's where and how I started putting a lot of different categories together.
What kind of things you collect?
It starts from the vintage cars, gets on to some two-wheelers, moves on to telephones, moves on to a lot of cameras, moves on to watches, moves on to books, moves on to British memorabilia, moves on to movie posters, because that has seen a sea change over a last 70-80 years era. And a lot of other artifacts. It could be a statue, it could be a typewriter, it could be for one of the first cell phones to hit the country, to tube radios, to actually vintage tin boxes. So the list is actually never ending. It's just that if it is old, it has to be put together. That's how I perceive and see it as.
So how you would start that?
Basically, if it was to go chronologically, I think we'll have to travel millions of years back. Why? Because I actually have put together some fossils in place, and it has been followed up by a lot of prehistoric tools. Both these elements actually came in as I studied anthropology, and I managed to put them together, and they have been actually certified by most of the top anthropologists in the country. From where it leads on to about a 200 odd year old journey where we have some artifacts coming in from the era which is like a part of broken stone from the Qutub Minar, or a part of the broken door from the Samod Palace. So from there it has led on to some British maps, a 1933 Delhi map where the Britishers actually put up, which actually still shows all the 255 odd villages in Delhi and only 3 inhabited areas. And carrying it on forward to the telephones, to the development of cameras. Some of the old cameras go back to 1920s and 1930s. The German made, the Indian made, and the British made. To the vintage clocks, which go back to again 1910s, 1920s and 1930s. From iconic names like the Ansonia from the US, or the Veltas from the Germany, or the Kenzels from Germany. So the dates are there. Now the latest in the chronological order, anything that I put together, I try that it should at least be about 50 or to 60 years old, except in categories which have been new. For example, pagers. The 90s saw communication change with the pagers. As a matter of fact, most of the youngsters that I come across today don't even know what a pager is. So it's as late as 90s as the latest collection. We can have a look at a couple of fossils just to have people understand what it is. We have a snail fossil here, which has actually become a stone over millions of years of heat and pressure and having been pressed. This is one category of fossils which is there. I can take you along with another type of fossil, which is a sedimentational fossil, in which the clay actually buries down the animal and eventually the animal is preserved. Here we have a fish fossil which is there. Now I have a lot of other fossils on the same lines, so just an idea for the viewers to understand what it is like. And from here we can take it on to looking at some prehistoric tools. The prehistoric tools have been stone collections like these, where the prehistoric man used to use it as a skiver. He would hold it up and clean out the skins using these stone tools, to using some arrowheads which have been made sharpened out and edges made sharper, to some bone drillers where they would drill it into the bones to derive the bone marrows. So the story prehistorically has been on how man has actually managed to develop technology for his own usage.
I am time. I am never good, and I am never bad. I never alter my pace. I just keep going. It's your version of me, where I am all the above. But in my world, the real world, I am always on time. Never late, never fast.
Man has always bothered and cared about time. As a matter of fact, time keeping has been a very important factor for man, and the different types of clocks got me a lot excited. As a matter of fact, I collect 3 different categories of watches and clocks, which is from the wall clocks, and it would be a very nice thing to actually share with you. People have a wall clock, I have a clock wall. So I have about 30 odd clocks which are there on a single wall, and all of them have a vintage value, and all of them have a pendulum operating, key operating, winding systems which is there in them. The second category are the table clocks, where I have a few very iconic ones, from the Worley 3-in-1s to the Ansonias which are there, to the Kenzels, and to a lot of Jaycos. The Jayco has been a very interesting story, where Jayco actually started making the clocks in India based on the German technology. So the Jaycos are there, the Worleys are there, the Hess clocks are there, which have been made in the Maharashtra region and taken up post-independence from the British stories. And then the last category which I have are the wrist watches. So from Romers to Fevalubas to Jayco, again a wristwatch, and now a few HMTs. They give you the whole value of the clocks. What I have done on the clocks over the last few years is that I have actually got them maintained. I've got them ticking, and the sound of their gongs, the sound of their ticking actually makes it. We've had very interesting stories behind it. As a matter of fact, I got a clock fixed where it would go tick tock, and the ring would come out every hour, the gong, and my maid walked out of the house saying, "This is a scary house, it is haunted." So it's a story which comes along with the operational aspects of it, and to some cuckoo clocks which have been an iconic story as well, where the bird we see walking out and giving a ring. So I have managed to actually do this with the help of 2 very old operators who have been operating it all their lives. They are almost touching 80 years plus of their ages, and they only help me in restoring my watches and my clocks. From moving on from the Fevalubas, which we saw, which actually come in from the early 1950s, let's have a look at the Romers. These Romers are actually dated to be 1958, and I have a very interesting story behind it. I took it to the oldest shop in Connaught Place and asked them if they could fix it for me, and the gentleman looked at it and smiled and told me, "I sold this very watch for 58 rupees in 1958. So do you want to spend a few thousand rupees on restoring it?" And I told him, "Yes, I want it." So that's the Romer which is there, which is coming in from the 1950s. This is a Henry Sandoz, again early 1950s, and all these clocks, all these wristwatches actually have a story that they were the smugglers' favorites. They were actually smuggled into those eras into the country, as bringing in these watches was not allowed. That's what makes them even more collectible. These are a few of the HMTs that I have. HMTs became a collector's item since the time HMT put down its shutters after I think about 6 decades of watch production. HMTs had its own charm. They're all winding clocks where every morning you need to actually adjust the time and then go on and carry on with your day. What we see here is one of the oldest table clocks that I have. That's an Insonia brought in from the US by the Britishers in the late 30s, early 1940s. And the quality and the look of it is still maintained almost after about 75 years as well. What we have here is a Worley 3-in-1 iconic German watch. As a matter of fact, it is a 3 different ringtone table clock and is a collector's item across the globe today. This is a Hess timepiece. The Hess has been an Indian takeover of the table clocks from the Britishers and followed the same kind of wheel movement and the key movements which were there. And they came up with wonderfully colored clocks, table clocks as such eventually. Okay, we have these as the folding clocks which came in, the table clocks which came in. They are the Europas which came in from the Germany, and they had it in all shapes and sizes. They had the square ones, the rectangular ones, the round ones, and one could just pack them up and put them back. What we have here are the German Kensels. The German Kensels were considered to be a very high technologically advanced table clocks in their era and were considered to be, again, in the modern times, a collector's piece. What we have here is American West clocks. The West clocks came in from the US and came in into all shapes and sizes, giving a lot of different perspective to the table clocks. They came in with broader bases most of the times. This is another Kensel piece which was taken over from the German technological art pieces.
That's very interesting, sounds very interesting. Next, if we talk about the phones, you can see that there are all kind of phones. Tell something about your phones.
Hello, dear friend Gandhi. You have shown through your works that it is possible to succeed without violence, even with those who have not discarded the method of violence. We may hope that your example will spread beyond the borders of your country. I hope that I will be able to meet you face to face someday.
Namaskar, my dear friend. It is a great consolation to me that the work I am doing finds favor in your sight. I do indeed wish that we could meet face to face, and that too in India at my ashram.
Communication has been a key element in the development of mankind. As a matter of fact, the world changed with the advent of the telephones. I still have managed to put in a lot of rotatory phones together, which have been there around since the 1950s. And we see a lot of pictures where people would get pictures clicked with the phones because they were unique for that element. Then I put together a couple of coin phones, which while people never had phones at their homes, would go out, use a rupee coin and would end up making a call. So I put that phone together, and some phones which I have actually gotten a different kind of rotatory mechanisms. And eventually in my phone, the latest one is the second model of the mobile phones launched in India. It's a Motorola flap phone. As a matter of fact, it is a 1998 model. Since the first phones came in 1996, I am still looking out for that one, but I managed to put together a 1998 Motorola flip phone which is there.
So with the telephone, as you said, communication started, and the next tool associated with communication is radios.
I think in our country, radios always played a major role. As a matter of fact, it's been one of the main mediums of communication, especially in a country like ours where the literacy levels have been pretty low. The radios have actually brought life to a lot of areas. That's what got me interested, because we have iconic radio brands which are there, from Murphy's to the Echoes, which are there. So the tube radio concept got me interested a lot, because we don't see the tube radios. As a matter of fact, today I think 90% of the population does not even understand what is a tube radio. So I started putting together some tube radios, and I have managed to put together and make 3 of them in a working condition as well now. What we see here is a very interesting radiogram. It has a Philips radio which is fixed inside, and the speakers itself weigh about 20 kgs. So this whole set almost weighs about 35 kgs plus. This is 60s. What we have here is a Siemens radio, which is a 1960s model. The second one which we see is a very interesting Philips model, because this is a model which came in with a speaker on the sides. As a matter of fact, it works. We can have a look at and hear some music right now out of it. It had metallic speakers which were installed into the Philips for the first time in 1960s. What we have is a Murphy Mayfair. The Murphys have been iconic, especially after we have had the Murphy song in the movie coming through. And I have about 8 or 9 different Murphy models which are there. And the Mayfair has been one of their most selling models as such. This is a 1970s Murphy. All of them are tube radios, and if we turn them around and see, we can see the tubes inside glowing away and showing the different signals. The whole aspect, they don't catch the FMs, and they only operate on the medium waves or the short waves. So listening to the short wave or a medium wave has a charm of its own.
Right. And with the advent of computers and laptops, one thing is almost extinct, and that is typewriters. So please tell about your collection of typewriters.
Typewriters have been on as late as the late 1980s or early 1990s. But the older typewriters which were actually brought in from the Britishers or the Germans or the Americans had its own charm. They operated in a very nice manner. So I put together about 5-6 typewriters just for their value and their brand stories. I have a Groma Calibri which is there, which is a German 1956 typewriter. I have a Smith Krona from the American collections. We have Remington which is there, and so on and so forth. What has changed and what people don't realize today is that typing on a computer and using a keyboard is a very easy element, and you have the option of rectifying it. But when you were using a typewriter, you needed the precision and the control of not making a mistake, because you could not rectify it. That was the art element in actually using a typewriter to set it up on a paper and go through it without actually making a mistake. So that's what gets me very interested in the typewriter stories as well.
If we talk about the British era, you have many things related to British memorabilia also. So tell us something about that. I've heard you have an old Delhi map.
The Britishers left a lot of benchmarking for us. As a matter of fact, we still follow a lot of things which the Britishers introduced to us in this part of the world, and putting them together and seeing their class and the quality that they would focus on brings in a lot of good feel factors and learning aspects. For a few examples, which is say the lithoprinting, which we follow for almost about 50-60 years, was introduced to us by the Britishers for printing the books or printing the posters as such. A small example of a British scale that I have from 1942 is that it is a scale which actually manages to do a lot of mathematical and a financial aspects all in itself. It has a calculation, it's a 3-in-1 scale which calculates a lot of things together. What we see here is the British Army knife. They give this to the people in the Second World War, where it was more of a poker rather than a knife. So anybody would go and just insert it and move on. So this is one of the British knives, which dates to 1878. As a matter of fact, we have the patent design for this, which has been on 22nd October 1878 made, and the technological advancement of it goes beyond, because even 150 years ago these people lined up their jugs with the ceramic inside to keep things warm, and they had the pins which they made in Australia, which was one of their territories at that point of time. So basically what you see is that the Britishers actually used all their territories for different products. These stapler pins for these staplers were made in Australia. We can see them there. These are 1940s stapler pins. What we see here is a British era earring hanging box. It's quite unlike what we see today. They used to have the earrings hanging into their box as a gift item. We see in this tin box we have all the territories the Britishers had under their control. We see India, we see Africa, we can see Australia, and we can see Canada. So a tin box which has a 4-continent history in itself. What we see here is the coronation plate. This is what was given out as a gift to all the people who came in to attend the Delhi Darbar in 1911. This is when Delhi became the capital and was shifted from Calcutta, that this was given out to people who attended the event.
Aditya ji, if we talk about your some favorite piece, or we can say a piece for which you have to toil hard to get it, any such memory?
Favoritism, I would not do it, because it's like you can't choose a child. I look at anything which is vintage or which is old with equal amount of preciousness attached to it, because I know if it is not put together or if it is not saved, it would soon disappear. For a matter of fact, actually had a car which I wanted so desperately that I was ready to take a flight and land up there to negotiate, so which I actually did. I flew down to Karnataka, got the car, negotiated with this doctor who had his car lying in his junkyard for the last 70 years and brought it back here. To a lot of other things as well, where for example, I found some sairs, which are the old weights before the kilograms came in, with a kabadiwala, and the kabadiwala was, when I stopped him and asked him, do you want to sell it to me? And he wanted a price where he said, I will sell it to you at double the price by weighing it. And I was absolutely jumping with joy that I would pay anything to get it, and he only wants double the price of the weight of the iron. So there are many stories practically attached with a lot of things which are there, and each product as it comes has its own story associated there. The Qutub Minar carved piece which I have, I think I was about 9 years when I actually went there, and the facade of the Qutub Minar had broken down, and unluckily we had all those parts dumped. I just picked up one as a piece to put together. So every piece that would be around that you see has a story associated with it.
Aditya ji, we heard you had a really hard time to buy a antique statue. Tell us something about that.
I saw a very nice stone statue and I wanted it for myself, but the guy who was selling it and I would not reach at a price which was mutually acceptable. So I said, okay, let me give him some time and I will take it up afterwards once he decides to bring down the price. But the guy in the meanwhile sold it off to somebody, and when I realized it a few hours later that he had sold it off, I was like nothing doing, I need it. So I went up to him, I said, I don't care, you have to find out where did you sell it to. So luckily this guy knew this guy he had sold it to, and he told me that he stays in Moradabad and he's left for Moradabad with the statue. So I told him, give me the numbers and everything, and finally I managed to track down the guy in Moradabad, and I told him that I need it, and this is what the story is. I did end up paying a bit more money than what we started with initially, but I was sure that I wanted it because I wasn't ready to lose it.
So this shows your passion and love for the antique artifact things. And moving on, we'd like to ask you, do you have any advice or tips for our viewers?
The only advice or suggestion that I think I can offer to the viewers is that we need to understand the value of the past, because whatever we have in the present actually comes in because we had it in the past and we managed to change it and develop it to the current times. Unluckily, most of the artifacts, most of the old things actually end up in trash. I've seen a lot of times people just dumping away the old things, and they just get into either being recycled. For example, the tin boxes, the plastic things, the other materials, they just dump it. There are values and emotions attached to it. If you can keep them, keep them. Otherwise, don't just dump them and throw them away. Give it to somebody who can take care of them. Give it to somebody who can preserve it for the eventual generations to have a look at.
So Aditya ji, talking about your future plans, you have worked hard collecting so many kind of things, artifacts and historical things. So what next?
I eventually will have my own museum. That's the focus, that is what I'm working towards, and I will make sure that that happens. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of time, and but I'm sure that I want to do it. I want to leave it, because even now I get people over to my place who especially want to bring in their children to see that this is how we used to make a telephone call, or this is how we used to click a picture, or this is how we used to type a letter. I want the future generations to value it, to see it, and to ensure that that happens, and even after I am gone, it stays as a legacy. I am going to have my private museum set up for sure, and I'm definitely working towards it.
It's time to say goodbye till we meet next time at the same time in the next episode of History Hunter. And in the next episode, we'll be talking about much more interesting things like film posters, vintage cars, scooters, and many more. Hi, Namaskar, I am Jyoti Kiran. Welcome to the second episode of DD Bharati's very special program, History Hunter. In the previous episode, we talked about old British relics, the coronation plates, the map of Delhi when Britishers made Delhi the capital, and many more such things related to the British memorabilia. We also saw a vast collection of vintage watches and clocks, tin boxes, matchboxes, radios, telephones and typewriters. So, you guys must be guessing what's in store for you in today's show. So, let's welcome our guest, Delhi's renowned vintage memorabilia collector, Mr. Aditya Vij. Aditya ji, welcome to the show. What you have to offer from your vast vintage collection to our viewers?
We should start with looking at something today which has a nostalgic value for all the Indians today. It's something which I feel bad about actually collecting, because what we're talking about are vintage war medals. Now, these war medals have been awarded and have been received by our brave soldiers, but I guess over time a lot of people haven't managed to keep them together, and luckily I have managed to lay my hands on a few war medals. So, I have a small war medal collection and I would like you to have a look at a few of them, especially a few which go back to the Second World War, where a lot of medals were awarded to the Indian soldiers, and we have a few very beautiful ones. If I show you a few ones here, this is a medal which has been given by the King George VI, and if we see the medal closely, it has the undivided India here. We have Pakistan as a part of India, we have Bangladesh as a part of India, we have Nepal as a part of India, extended down to Burma. So, this is a collector's item which shows how India looked under the British era. Let me show you another war medal from the Second World War. Now, this is a war medal again awarded to the Indian soldiers who performed exceptionally well in the Second World War. And if you see this medal, it is a medal which is from 1939 to 1945. And it has the name of the soldiers and their units engraved onto the sides, which makes it a real collectible item. As I said, it's something which should have remained a pride for the person who performed, but somehow or the other, I don't know if they've been stolen and have come through, or the people had to give them up. So, there is a collection of a lot of beautiful war medals which we see here. Not only that, we have the post-war medals which have been awarded to the Indian soldiers in the different wars which have come in. Now, this one is a 1965 war medal, where we see a very beautiful one which has been awarded to the Nagaland unit of the army, and it has a beautifully carved elephant which is the unit factor which has been displayed here. Similarly, a lot of other ones. This has been awarded to the Jammu and Kashmir unit for protecting the hills, again going back to the 1965 war, and has a few beautiful structures for safeguarding the forts, safeguarding the historical monuments in Delhi. So, this goes on. The collection for the war medals is something which is there. The latest ones I have is even from the Kargil war, one of the medals which comes in from the Kargil war, which is here, the Operation Parakram medal. So, it's been a situation where I'm trying to put together. I'm still looking out for a First World War medal, and I hope I can find one just to complete my 100 years of war medal collections.
As a Napoleon Bonaparte saying goes, he once said, "Give me enough medals and I'll win any war for you." So, now let's move on to our next section. Books are called as men's best friend, and we got to know that you have books as old as related to the era of 18th century. So, tell us something about your books, the oldest ones you have, and how many of them you are having in your collection.
It's a pleasure to have books, to be actually going and seeing them, how they have evolved right from the last 400 years. Unluckily, I don't have books which date back to 300, 400 years, but I
have managed to put together books which are about 130, 135 years old to start with. My oldest book goes back to about 1884, and from there on, over the next 30 to 40 years, I managed to put on some iconic books together. And it gives me a great pleasure to see works of a lot of very recognized authors and books which date back to more than 100 years actually being preserved in pristine conditions. I have books which have iconic writers, from Kipling's to Charles Dickens to the Wuthering Heights to Rabindranath Tagore's Gardner, to some Oxford dictionaries which are almost about 90 years old, translations of dictionaries from English to Urdu and vice versa, H.G. Wells, The History of Mankind, Pearl as Buck, the Glasgow's. So the list is endless. The books which are there are not only great in terms of their content, but the quality in which they have been produced, the pictures that they have had, the hand drafted, the handcrafted, the hand painted pictures in them bring together a feeling which is uncomparable. So I have books which start from that era, the books which start from the 1818s going to the 1930s and the 1940s, and from there on my collection takes on to a lot of comic books, because I put together a lot of American comics books into the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s and 1960s. So it's been a collection where I feel that I have a collection of say about somewhere close to about 5,000 to 6,000 books. What we see here is a 1929 Auckland weekly. Now this magazine, a weekly magazine, used to be available across the British Empire, the Australia, the New Zealand and England. And if we see, it has some fantastic quality of picture and printed as old as 1929. And it has been a very, very well kept piece. That's what makes it a very interesting collectible piece.
Aditya ji, would you like to show some iconic book from your collection to our viewers?
Sure, there are a few very nice ones which I would like the viewers to have a look at, and specifically because these books actually take us back to the Indianism that we tend to follow. Now what I have here is a original 1911 Vishnu Puran. Now as we know, Vishnu we consider as the preserver, and this book actually in Sanskrit called the Mahapuranam actually gives out everything which is well preserved, the complete story of Vishnu in Sanskrit shlokas. Now this book has survived now almost about 105 years, and the good part is that it has been well preserved. Each page of it has been kept very well. So this gives me a great sense of actually preserving a piece of Indian history as well as an Indian religion factor. Actually the list goes on further. You have the Wuthering Heights, which is here, which is again I think the most iconic movie which we guys have lived through the cinema. So this is the original Wuthering Heights which is there, and the art of the book by Emily Bronte which has been here makes it feel very different from the movie. So actually having the book makes it feel a lot better. Similarly, I have the Robinson Crusoe, the first edition, I have the Charles Dickens. It makes you preserve the books. You want them to keep going on for probably another few hundred years, maybe down the line, like we try to locate books which are 300, 400 years old. I would love to see them survive for that period of time.
Collecting things is a hobby, and most of the times hobby is related to habit. Aditya ji, we have heard you have a smoker's corner. Do you smoke?
No, I actually don't smoke, and as a matter of fact that makes the collection a lot more interesting. Why? Because it's easier when you are actually using something, but I realize that the facts and the damage smoking does, it does no good. So I never smoked in my life, but the smoking industry actually has been a very aristocratic industry. if you go back to the history and you see, smoking has been something which has been revered with the aristocratic class or the royals. So that's what actually got me to put together the Smokers Corner. I've been working on the Smokers Corner and I've been actually putting it together into 5 different categories, and as I went and dwelled into it, I found that it had a very interesting history and a lot of different variations into it. I collect vintage cigarette boxes, I collect vintage lighters, I put together matchbox covers, I put together matchboxes. As a matter of fact, I have one of the biggest matchbox collections which dates back to very historic matchboxes, and I also try and put together some advertisements for the cigarettes which used to appear. No longer do we get that situation now because they've been banned by law, as we know the harmful effects of smoking. So their advertisings had a lot of collector's value. So these are the 5 categories which I put together and I make my Smokers Corner. I don't do that very proudly because, as I said, smoking is not a great habit, but the collectibles are a great piece of collection. I'll start with the tin boxes, and my tin box collection for the cigarettes goes back to the 1940s and the 1950s. I have some iconic cigarette case boxes which have been actually made in England and brought into India because the Players Navy cut. Now this cigarette actually is a British cigarette, and cigarettes used to come in a pack of 50 cigarettes into tin boxes like these. So this is a 1930s cigarette Navy cut box. Apart from this, I have another box which is the Graven A. Now this is again a British cigarette, again a 50s pack which used to be brought in into tin boxes from England and sold here. They actually also used to come in as a gift box situations. This is the BVD, the British cigarettes made in England, and they used to have 50 cigarettes and were given in as a aristocratic gift at that point of time. So these are the BVD cigarette cases. We have the Rezik cigarette cases which are here made in Piccadilly specifically for a very elite class of the people. They were virgin cigarettes, as we used to call them. And these are the honeydew cigarette case boxes. The honeydews were a lot of very famous cigarettes in India. The 500 cigarettes used to be packed into this in packaging of 10s each and brought in and sold here along with the boxes as a wholesale box. Cigarettes, as I said, was an aristocratic habit. It wasn't something like anybody was carrying it. So they used to make cigarette boxes specifically to keep the cigarettes safe. This is a cigarette box in which somebody could carry 4 cigarettes for themselves and carry it in their pockets so that the cigarettes don't break or get damaged. So these are the kind of interesting elements which makes you collect and put these things together. Apart from the cigarettes, what came along simultaneously was the lights. The lights or the matchbox, we guys probably don't think too much about a matchbox today, but way back in 1920s or 1930s, matchbox used to be a very prized possession. We did not have the technology to make matchboxes. We used to import them from Sweden, and a lot of kings in the country and a lot of maharajas used to actually send their pictures to Sweden to get their matchboxes made.
Mahamantri, which royal painting of mine do you think I should send to Sweden for my much-loved matchboxes? I want them to look the finest.
Oh, mighty king, my submission is to go with the one that our Shahi Chitrakar painted in the royal garden. The one in which the shine of your sword can shame the sun.
Very well said, Mahamantri. Send the portrait to Sweden today positively.
Sure.
Now, so the matchboxes had to be protected. Now what I'm showing you here are what we call in as the matchbox protectors. These were metal plates which they used to put, and they used to actually put the matchbox inside these metal cases to preserve the matchbox from de-shaping or getting wet. So this is what you had coming in as the matchbox preservers or the matchbox cases. So you have plenty of them. I have a few of them. This is, and they also used to act as a promotional tool for the companies and the manufacturers for the matchbox cases. So I have a lot of cigarette cases which are there, which used to be the preserving element for the cigarette cases. The lighters, they've always caught our imaginations. So we had the lighters which were put together. I have a collection of lighters, and almost every company put together their lighters. Why did they put together their lighters? Was because it was actually a sense of advertisement. Otherwise, it was a sense of possession for everybody which had. We have the Jack Daniels lighter here. We have a Ford lighter here. We have a Ford lighter here. We have a Rothmans. We have a Jim Beam. Plus, I have managed to put together a lot of lighters from the airlines, because till about 1980s you could smoke in the airlines. So all the airlines used to have their lighters, and most of these lighters have a history attached to them. They talk about the company, they talk about the way things were, and the way they used to be lighted up were very interesting. Every lighter actually lit up very differently. For the example, this one, if you see, it's a playing card game. If I show you this one, it is like a bomb. It opens like a bomb and lights up like a bomb. The one which I have here is a very interesting, because it's a lighter come cigarette lighter come a cigar lighter. If I open this side and burn it, it helps me burn the cigar. This used to come in as a set. This used to be the tobacco stuffing tube for the situation, or to attach a cigarette along and burn it up, and on this side this would be a cigarette lighter. So we see that a lot of different techniques, a lot of different works were done on the cigarette lighting situations, because it represented something which was more than the ordinary. So this is what makes me put together my smoker's corner. Then came in the cigarette holding boxes. Now the cigarette smoking holding boxes used to be boxes like this, where they could put in their cigarettes, put it together and carry it in their pockets, because it would be something to show off. So a lot of very interesting cigarette boxes came up along the way. We still get them. As a matter of fact, this is a new one, but I just put it together, and of course it comes with a huge warning on smoking now. But I put it together because this is the evolutionary phase of how cigarettes have been sold over the last 100 odd years. So that is where the story of the smoker's corner comes from. I can show you a couple of very old, as I said, Maharajas used to send in their pictures to get the matchboxes printed. So I have a very interesting matchbox which dates back here. So this is a matchbox cover where the Maharaja sent his picture to Sweden to get the matchbox printed. And a lot of companies worked on the matchboxes at that era, and let me show you a Swedish made matchbox as how it used to come in during that time. So this is a 1920s made in Sweden matchbox cover. So all these things put together actually make what I call in as my smoker's corner. I find the category very interesting, though it may not be a very healthy habit.
So it was an interesting collection, Aditya ji. After the vintage smoker's corner, let's move on to our next section, and I believe it is the vintage two-wheelers.
Sure.
What an interesting collection of vintage two-wheelers. Aditya ji, how many of them you have in your collection?
I have about 8 two-wheelers which are there. I've been actually trying to restore them and put them together. And the reason why I actually started putting up the two-wheelers was that my father used to drive me around on a Vespa when I was a small kid. So my first interest came up that I should have a Vespa, and as a matter of fact, this Vespa that you see here is the same Vespa which I used to ride when my father used to take me around as a kid. So this is a 1963 Vespa, the original Italian Vespa, and I managed to get it restored. And specifically I got it restored from a gentleman in Karnataka, because he used to import parts for Vespa. And eventually I put together another Vespa which you can see here. Now this is a very nice Vespa. This is a 1967 Vespa, and the good part of it is that this Vespa actually had a few changes which came up after the 1963 Vespas, and it's still a pleasure to drive it around. I drive it around very often, and it still gives me that feel factor of my childhood when I used to ride a Vespa. Eventually, the Vespas lost out on the market and the Lambrettas took over, another Italian brand which took over. So the Lambrettas were called in as the workhorses. I have two Lambrettas which are there, and eventually by the 1980s, when Bajaj took over the scooter market, Lambrettas actually moved out. The Italians moved out. The Vespas shut shop and the Lambrettas stopped being manufactured and were taken over by the Indian companies. We have then the eventual Lambi Polo coming in, which is this one which you see. This is a Lambi Polo. It was taken over by the API, the Scooters India Limited, eventually in the 1980s. And then they came up with their own version of the Vijay Super, which was again actually at heart a Lambretta, but it was called and marketed as a Vijay Super. So that's the scooter story which I have actually managed to put together. I have about 7 of the vintage scooters which are there. They're not really vintage, but they're classics because 1960s onwards to 1980s, they're more classic than vintage, but they give you a very, very interesting feel factor of how scooters evolved in India. They have been actually the thing that Indians have always ridden in the last 40 years. Before actually in the 1990s the bikes took over. So till then the scooters have been what of the major weightage and value. So I have them and I managed to restore all of them into their original conditions. So that's my two-wheeler collection, which includes Vespas from 1960s, the Lambrettas from 1970s, the Vijay Super from late 1970s and early 1980s.
So how difficult is to maintain them? Do you get the spare parts now, the old ones like the scooters of the era of 60s and 50s, and how often you take them for ride?
It is difficult to maintain because you don't get the spare parts any longer. The spare parts have disappeared and you need to find ways, or you need to at a lot of times also import the spares, and most of the current mechanics available in the market don't understand about them, because for them they can't even figure out where or which direction is the carburetor in, or which direction is the spark plug in, and how do this they used to run. So a lot of times I have to actually explain to them, I have to actually tell them where it is. And luckily there are still few people, mechanics who are in their late 70s or early 80s, who are still around to guide and tell what is to be done. As a matter of fact, I got one of my Lambrettas restored from a gentleman who's almost close to 80 now. So it's difficult, but it has its own charm. It still manages to run and it still manages to give me the pleasure. I ride them around off and on. I take them for a small ride at times, and it still makes you feel nostalgic about how these things operated.
It is interesting to know that you ride almost all of them quite often. Now if we talk about bikes, vintage bikes, how many of vintage bikes you have in your collection apart from scooters?
Bikes, I have always wanted to have a few bikes, but unluckily I don't have a lot of them. But just to ensure that I keep my interest going, I have got a bike modified to look like a British Army 1942 bike. And what got me to do that was that I actually laid my hands on two original seats of a vintage bike which belonged to the British Army. So I actually bought a Bullet and I got it modified to look like a British Army 1942 bike. Eventually I'm sure I'm going to have a few more vintage bikes put together as well.
So keep watching History Hunter, as in the next episode we'll be showcasing an awesome huge collection of vintage cars. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Namaskar, I am Jyoti Kiran. Welcome to the third episode of DD Bharti's very special program, History Hunter, a program that takes you through journey in time. In the previous episode, we discussed about antique books, the smoker's corner, the vintage two-wheelers and war medals. In today's episode, we have many more interesting things to show from the vintage memorabilia collection. So, welcome to the vintage world. Welcome to the world of vintage poster memorabilia. As you can see, there are many posters behind me. The posters belonging to the bygone era, the handmade, hand-printed posters of Bollywood films, the posters of bygone era advertisements of cars and all. So Aditya ji, how your passion of started with the collection of these posters and ads, hand-painted, handmade posters?
Posters have riveted our country for the last 80 to 90 years. As a matter of fact, they have been one of the main communicational mediums used by especially the Bollywood industry and the advertisers. 50 years back, 80 years back, we did not have all the advertising mediums. We just had the posters with which we used to connect with the masses, and they have a history of their own. We had black and white eras in those areas, and we wanted to communicate on a color basis. So the posters were actually hand painted from the pictures that were taken by the black and white cameras, and then they were transferred into plate, which came in up as the litho prints. So they have a very interesting history behind their own stories, and how what we look at today as the photoshopping was done by hand in those days. That's what makes collecting the vintage cameras and the pictures and the advertisements a lot interesting. Let me show you around some very interesting posters which are there in my collection. The first one we can see here is an Agfa Isoli ad, where we have a beautifully hand-painted tiger and the poster then transferred into a litho print. Similarly, if you see, we have one of the oldest Cadbury's hand-painted poster of the 1954 year, where the actual Cadbury milk chocolate packing was very different, and you can see the hand-painted poster there. Some of the other interesting posters or the advertisements from the same era, we have the Hillman Minx, which is a 1952, and these are original ads which appeared into the magazines at that time. I was trying to make sure that I get the actual ads, not the ones downloaded from the internet. So I actually located the magazine which carried those ads. So we have the Austin 40 Somerset, which is there. We have the Morris Oxford. And interestingly, these posters or these ads actually had to be shot overseas and then brought in, because we still lacked the technology in the 1940s to be able to produce these ads. So that's what makes the vintage posters, the story behind them, a very interesting one. So most of the things that you see here are the litho printed ones or the actual hand painted ones, which have been then transferred to a printing medium.
What you see through the lens of your eye is what is short-lived. What you see through my lens is what lives through time. Your image in the mirror will yield to age, but your image through me will defy age.
Wow, a huge collection of vintage antique cameras. Aditya ji, we have heard you have over a collection of 100 cameras. So tell us something about your collection of antique and vintage camera.
Why don't you have a seat? See, cameras have been around since the late 1800s, but cameras actually started becoming a usable factor around the 1920s to the 1930s. Cameras have a huge historical value to it, and it got me attracted a lot because the technology in the cameras has been changing drastically. So it was a pleasure, or it was something to be worth digging out for, where I actually put together cameras right from the 1930s to the late 80s, when the first Polaroids started coming in and the idea of instant photos started happening. So I have managed to put together 100 odd vintage cameras, which include a few very iconic ones, from the Mamias to the Rollicords to the Vigneshwara field cameras to the Houghtons of the from England to Adox 66. I can show you some very interesting cameras, and if you go back to the movies which came in into the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, you can actually see a lot of people using those cameras. So it's been a great journey trying to put them together. As a matter of fact, I have a very beautiful projector from the 1950s. This is how the movies were projected there in that times. So this is the movie which is still being unexposed, and this is the roller on which the movie would be loaded onto, and the projector would project out. Now the projector, if you see, came in from Austria at that point of time. And the cameras, I can show you around some interesting ones. If you see, this is a small bellow camera. It's a small field bellow camera, and this used to be done with the plates which were placed here. If you see around, I can show you that how the plates were positioned. The openings of this had to be done so that the exposure could happen. So these were silver oxidized plates which were inserted inside this and then clicked. If we see some movies which were there, we used to see that gentleman putting these up on a stand, putting up a black cloth and running behind to get the pictures which were there. So these are very interesting cameras where the adjustments to the lenses could be made, and the British and the Germans were mastered this art for us. So though in 1940s we started making them in the country as well, but we have a lot of iconic bellow cameras which used to come in from that era. As a matter of fact, very interestingly, we moved on from the bellow plate cameras to the film rolls. As a matter of fact, most of the current generation hasn't even seen the film rolls, leaving apart that. So these were the film rolls which we used to put in something like the bellow camera you're holding, the Agfa Isoli. So these were the film rolls which used to be loaded on. And actually photography used to be an art. Why? Because once this is exposed, you don't alter it, or you don't Photoshop it, or you don't make changes to it. So that's what made very interesting aspects. And cameras have gone through a lot of changes. Let me show you some actually preserved, very well preserved cameras. This is a Mamiya C33, a professional one. And it's actually been used 3 times, because the guy I managed to get it from only used it 3 times in his life and actually had kept it in a locker for the last 45 years. And it still comes in with its original packing, its original manual, its original bill, and is still scratchless. So there are a lot of people who have managed to keep things and protect them, and that's what makes me take up the idea of actually putting them up together, for maybe putting it together for the next 50 years. So these are some of the cameras which actually make you feel that if people have preserved it, they need to be further preserved. Plus, we have a lot of different companies coming up and playing their roles. We had the Jiva Box cameras which were coming in, the Jiva Box, or we had the Adox 66, as I told you, and they had very interesting mechanisms of loading on. If I show you how they were loaded on, see, this still has a film inside, and the film used to be rolled up like this, the exposure. So this was how the reels, and you see the reel is a very different paper reel in the 1950s than what you saw coming in into the 90s. So this is where the technological changes made cameras a very, very interesting factor. Then we moved on to the era of the Polaroids. Now this is a very interesting Polaroid, because if you see, this has a 4 lens Polaroid. So you could take instant photographs choosing the lens which was there. So Polaroids came in with very interesting stories as well, eventually in the 1980s, where the plate, you get the instant photography concept started. We can walk through and see a few more very interesting cameras.
Sure. Aditya ji, this is a huge vintage camera. Tell us, looks quite wonderful. Tell us something about this.
See, this is a field camera. The field cameras were used in the 1930s and 40s, basically by the government to test out and click pictures or for the geographical stories. this was later adopted into clicking in for the normal people as such. So this is a 2 feet long camera, and surprisingly, if you see, this is an Indian made camera. We managed to get in the technology from the Brits, and we started making the Vargheswara cameras in Chennai. So this camera actually is an Indian made field camera. This is late 1930s and is almost 2 feet long, and there have been many versions of it and many sizes in which this is there. This has been one of their biggest sized cameras that is around, and it's been a very well maintained piece. So I managed to get it from a photographer in Kerala. So that's how it is, and it has the very interesting, as I said, the plate cameras. This is where the manual plates used to be put in, inserted, so that the cameras could click the pictures. This is how the exposure used to happen. The exposure would be done up like this would come out, and then this would be pushed back in as soon as the exposure was made. So this is where it was placed behind this, and this is what was sent out to the for the washing of the camera plates. So this is a very interesting piece which I have. We have a lot of other cameras on the similar lines. As you saw, this is the original Watson camera, which was made by the British Bellows, and as I said, it comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. Now this is the smaller version on the cameras which came up. This is a Zeiss camera, which is an icon camera, and which came in with very interesting features eventually. This came in with a top viewfinder. It came in with a balancing story where you could actually see if the picture is centralized or not before you would end up clicking, and you could actually roll it back and pack it once it was done. So the Bellows cameras have had their life. They've ruled the camera world and still look the most beautiful of the cameras. From here, these cameras passed on to the Aqua era, as I would like to call it, and you see the Aqua came in with such beautiful looking sleek cameras in the 1940s, called as the Movex cameras. So the Aqua came in where you had the viewfinder where you would look inside into the camera instead of doing it from there. And from here, the technology of the cameras passed on to the twin lens cameras, where you could see the cameras could be viewed from the top. You could place it on your tummy level and then look at the picture and click. So that's how it has evolved and has come to this point in the camera history.
Aditya ji, antique vintage cameras are valued by the collectors for the various reasons, and you have a vast collection of cameras. Our viewers would like to know how difficult it has been collecting such a big number of vintage cameras, and how price-wise, if you would like to tell us how difficult it would have been to gather all of them.
See, of course, it's not something that you find off the street. It's not something that you walk across to a mall and buy. It is something which are usually buried at people's homes. And luckily, a house cleaning story in India is a very common one. So every now and then you see people cleaning their houses and things actually coming out. So one needs to keep his ears and eyes open to have them. But there have been specific cases where I've been wanting very specific ones. For example, till about a year and a half back, I never had a Bello camera. So I actually was searching the length of the country to find Bello cameras. And the first camera that I found was down south in Kerala with somebody, a photographer. So it's been a search. It's been that you need to make the efforts of finding it. So luckily, it has borne fruits. And as far as the price goes, it's a bit difficult to actually put a price to these things, because you can get them dirt cheap because people just wish to throw them off. Yes. So you can get them dirt cheap, while the others who value it, the others who understand it, actually ask for the real price that it beholds. So I have bought cameras at dirt cheap prices, and I have paid high thousands for a lot of cameras as well.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, this is the first digital camera which came into India, and Kodak brought it in India in the year 1986-87. So that's the latest of the, you can call it as the digital camera, the father of digital cameras in India.
Light, camera and action makes a film, and posters promote the film. and you have a vast collection of we can see Bollywood films of 1940s, hand printed, handmade posters. We would like to know how difficult it would have been getting these posters and from where you got these posters.
See, posters luckily have been kept behind by a lot of cinema halls which closed down and the distributors which closed down. So, as a matter of fact, down the years, they have started getting value. Earlier, they were just paper for them, but over the years, people have started appreciating and doing that. As a matter of fact, a lot of posters come in from Bombay still, which comes in from either collectors, comes in from studios, comes in from people who have stacked them. So I've been lucky to have posters as old as 1940s, 1950s and 1960s. And that's what makes them do well. And surprisingly, like all the other things, people who have kept things well have really kept them well, because you can see this poster of Roti that you see here is a 1944 movie, and it looks like a brand new because it has been kept into one of the studios in Bombay, and now just about 4 or 5 years back they offloaded whatever they had. So the Roti 1944 poster that you see, or if you see Azad 1951, or if you see 1956 Barish, though Barish has been a real fight. As a matter of fact, it's been in a very bad condition. It took me almost a week to put it back together, and still the top part is missing. So I actually have put each small piece, and if you touch this paper, it's gone so bad that it just goes away. So, but otherwise it was such a beautiful poster that I was no way wanting to let it go. So I put it together. So it's been a good theory about the posters where you can actually still find a lot of them, and most of the people do end up appreciating it for the hand painting aspects of it which was done in those eras.
So we can say that making posters was a tedious job in those days. Artists used to make them by hand and then they were converted into litho prints. Nowadays it's the synthetic vinyl prints, which is a easy task. So now let's move on and see what's more in store in Aditya Ji's collection.
Some possess me for fancy. Some possess me for need. Some possess me for grandeur. And some possess me for greed. But they know not that I possess them for being their dream chaser.
Aditya Ji, let's take our viewers on a ride through the past. You have a good collection of 10 vintage cars and several two-wheelers. We can see a beautiful vintage car, Austin 7. Tell us something about this car.
See, this happens to be my second oldest car that I have. This is an Austin Ruby, or Austin 7 as it used to be called in. It's a 1934 model, and it is a very, very nice car because it came in with a lot of very interesting concepts. This used to be brought in from England at that point of time and used to carry the spoke wheels, as you can see, which were the traditional mark for the vintage cars in that era. And it used to be the people's small car. As a matter of fact, the Austin Ruby used to come in with two different types. It used to have an open roof factor as well, and this one is the one which used to come in with the closed roof factor. And it came with a very interesting factor. If I show you the air conditioning systems that existed at that point of time, this is how the windows used to open so that the air could flow in from the external points. So even at that point of time, the comfort was kept as the top priority for the riders. So it is a very cute looking car, and I love driving it around at times. Let's move on and I can show you some other very beautiful cars which are around. The one which you see here, which you are on your left hand side, is the Austin Somerset. Okay. It also used to be called in as the A40. It used to come in into three different models. This is a 1952 model which is there, and this has been of course restored. All the cars that you see here have been restored to their values, and this actually used to look like a very beautiful car, and it's slightly different from the Morris Oxfords which eventually led on to the ambassador as such. I'll show you the ambassador of that time as well as we walk through. So this car is more on those lines. Now,
Right.
as we walk through, what you see here is what we have as my prized collection, and as a matter of fact, I should take you for a ride in this today as well. This is a 1946 called in as the American Mafia car. This is a Hudson Super 6, and it is the only car we have in Delhi. This weighs about 3,600 kgs and is a car which the American mafias, if you go and see the 1940s and the 1950s movie, you would see the mafia chief coming out from the back seat, because it used to represent the boss, it used to represent the royalty for the Indians at that point of time. And this is, if you see the number plate, it comes in from one of the royalties near Calcutta. So it is a beautiful piece, and as I said, they're restored and they still run. So I should take you around for a drive in this.
Okay, so as you said that Hudson was a car of mafias for Americans and a car of royalty for the Indians. How difficult it is to maintain these vintage cars?
Of course, it's a very difficult story to maintain the vintage cars. It's easier to have a look at them, but it takes a lot of pain, effort and energy to actually get them into running condition, because without them constantly being serviced, without them constantly being taken care of, they would rot away. So the idea has been to maintain them and keep them alive as long as I can. So that's the main aim behind keeping the vintage cars. I have 14 of them now, out of which I have managed to have 11 of them in a running condition. The rest 3 should soon join the restored gang.
So do you participate in vintage racing cars and things like that?
No,
also?
I actually haven't participated in any vintage rallies, but I've had a couple of my own vintage car shows which have been around. So that's been more for my friends and the acquaintances that I've done it. So I've had 2 vintage shows of my own.
Have you ever been approached by any period filmmaker for the usage of any of your cars?
Not really as yet, but a few people have come in asking them for their weddings, which I've flatly told them, sorry, I don't do that, because everybody has a charm of actually driving back on their weddings into a vintage car.
So if ever in future any period filmmaker will come down to you, you will offer your car?
Yeah, for a movie I don't mind, because it gives it the decent coverage and the due respect to the car.
Aditya ji, it seems to be a very long, huge car, Dodge Kingsway. Tell us something about this car.
See, this actually used to be the second of the what used to be called in as the American Giants. They used to have 3 cars which were called in as the American Giants: the Dodge Kingsway, the Hudson Super 6 and the Plymouth Savoy. So luckily I have all the 3 of them now. So this used to be the longest car to have hit the Indian roads. It edge to edge measures 17.5 feet, and this used to be again one of those prime American cars which used to be seen around. So it's in a running condition. I need to get it repainted and redone, but it is a beautiful car, and it can be driven around still. I've got the engine restored, so and it looks beautiful. If you see the fin tails of this car, that has been the most interesting factor of this car, because this fin tails used to represent this as a totally out of the spacecraft space shuttle look which was there, which was the theme, as I would say, in the 1950s. The space used to be a very crucial and important factor. So this is where the Dodge Kingsway comes in as a very, very important and a very nice car with special features. The Plymouth Savoy took over after this. It's actually the Dodge Kingsway itself, but a newer version of the Dodge Kingsway. And what you see here is the Morris Oxford. This is Morris Oxford is basically what you call in as the father or mother of the modern ambassador. The modern ambassador came in from this car. The Morris Oxford was the last of the cars which was come in as the Morrises. After this, in India it was changed and it was made into the Ambassador, while Morris carried on its cars to 6 series. So the last of the Morris 6 came up in the year 1967. As a matter of fact, I have that car. I can show you around that car as well.
Captain Russell, क्या तुमको पता है? I bought a Morris Oxford. It is such a beauty. It's going to be delivered today.
I'm sure it's a beauty, sir. Finally, raising the lagan of these peasants paid off. Cheers, General.
Cheers, Captain.
Okay, as we saw that, this is the Morris Oxford 6. This is the 1967 Morris, and as a matter of fact, this Morris was the last of the Morris which used to come into India. And this Morris has been a bit unique because this is the time when actually Morris placed the engine in a very different format into the car. If we see a car, you see that the engines of the cars are vertically placed, but in this, the engine of the car has been horizontally placed. If you see, this is an engine which has been horizontally placed instead of the vertical placement of the car. So this makes this Morris a very unique Morris in itself. So this was the characteristics of the Morris 6. I can take you for a ride into this as well if you want. It's running today.
Men may come and men may go, but these are eternal. The memories, the memorabilia, and the artifacts. I hope you all enjoyed watching the journey in time as much as we enjoyed making it for you. Thank you so much. Goodbye.